Okay, so you're Terry's best man and probably best friend, closest friend.
I would say over the years, consistently his best friend. There have been others who have been closer to him perhaps at any one span of time,
Yeah.
but over the long haul, I probably am his closest friend, and his friend who tries to wish Terry the best for Terry. I have made it very clear to Terry over many years, and as recently as a few weeks ago, that I accept Terry for Terry, warts and all. I wish him nothing but the best. I applaud his energy. I applaud his drive. I applaud his effort. And I am not in any way jealous of it. Nor do I in any way particularly want anything from Terry.
Well, I think you might be able to comment on the toll that Terry's drive has taken from him.
Yes. Terry is the most focused, driven person that I know. And it goes back to our childhood, teen years. Terry, although in high school, when I met him in Cleveland High School, Terry's drive and focus certainly was anywhere but academics. He was, at best, a mediocre student by design, because his focus was on other things. Baseball primarily, cars, and Terry was very good at being the organizing, driving force with the guys that we hang around with. He always made sure everybody understood what it was he wanted and imposed his will on everybody to get it done how he wanted it, the way he wanted it, when he wanted it. There were a couple of us who, while not as vocally demonstrative as Terry, every now and then we would say, well, no, we're not going there. And sometimes we would have to take some corrective action and deny Terry his ultimate wishes.
Well, Terry always said he makes it, he's a very good friend, but it's very hard for you to be friends with him. He's not an easy friend to have.
He is not an easy friend to have if you don't understand him. Terry comes across to many people, including his family, as domineering, demanding, driving, but you have to accept that that's just Terry. But if Terry takes an interest in you and cares about you and befriends you, you can't have a better friend, because the guy has never shown me a malicious intent, a deliberate intent to harm anybody, do anything wrong to anybody or about anybody. But his mannerisms are so driven and focused that he turns a lot of people off, and they don't know how to cope with him.
Yeah,
I've done a pretty good job over the years of filtering out the good intentions from the overbearing nonsense.
And yeah, that's just Terry being Terry.
That's just Terry being Terry, and you have to either accept him or reject him, but there is no in between.
Right. Then the basis of his drivenness, the drive that motivates him, is really with his parents, with his dad.
Yes, yes. I spent many, many hours in Terry's home when we were in high school, and Terry spent many hours in my home also. But I saw Terry interact with his parents. He worshiped his mother, who, in my opinion, was a very nice, very wonderful, very patient woman. She was the real living example of June Cleaver. I mean, she was the 50s sitcom perfect wife, mother. The house was always right, the meals were always right, took care of her children, was in the PTA and the den mother in the Scouts and the whole thing. And that had a very deep influence in Terry's life. But I don't think that's what is driving Terry. Terry's father was the stereotypical Class A personality. He knew what he wanted. He got what he wanted. And he forced the rest of his family to conform to what he wanted. Sometimes to their detriment.
And life can be tough living with somebody like that.
Yes. Now, I knew Terry's father extremely well. I was very close to Terry's father. When Terry left for Southeast Missouri State College at Cape Girardeau, I almost became the surrogate son. I would go over with my family to Terry's parents' house. I would go to dinner with them while Terry was away at National, and even when he went to Australia. Prior to having any grandchildren, Doc adopted my son as his grandchild almost. They gave him presents. They took him out to dinner. And it's my son. And they adopted him almost.
So the same.
So we were very close.
But you're seeing the same thing in Terry's father that you see in Terry as far as
Yeah.
when he takes an interest.
Yeah, when he takes an interest, it's 100% interest. And Terry had this almost godlike worship, and still has, of his father, and put him at such, sometimes an unrealistic plateau, that Terry does not believe, in my opinion, to this day, that he has lived up to his father's expectations. I know that when Terry left for Australia, that was against his father's wishes. And that was the first time I had ever seen Terry really put his foot down and say, I am going to do what I am going to do, whether you like it or not.
Well, Terry even says that that was the first time he's ever done anything against his father's
Yeah.
wishes. But it's almost like he had to go to Australia for him to engage in what eventually made his career.
Well,
And get away from the.
to get out from under the shadow, perhaps.
Well, he said that it was already predetermined that he was going to go to chiropractic school and come back and assume his dad's practice.
Yes.
And that probably wasn't really what he wanted to do. I don't know. You know him better than I do.
Well, Terry is an excellent organizer. Terry is not good on details.
He's a thinker.
He's a thinker. He's an idea guy. He is the big picture guy. To be in practice and see patients, you have to be very detail oriented, and you have to be a people person. Not that Terry isn't detail oriented. When he is doing his radiology practice and reading and interpreting x-rays and MRIs, and is very methodical, very meticulous, and knows exactly what he's looking at and what he's doing, and he doesn't miss things.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to everyday life, remembering names, remembering phone numbers, being on time to someplace, conversing with people. His mind is going in 35 directions at one time, and he is not at all focused on the subject at hand. I'm sure that you have seen exactly what I'm talking
I
about.
tell him he needs a full-time secretary.
When he is in St. Louis, I am his full-time secretary. I am his social secretary. I make sure he gets to where he needs to be on time. This is a prime example. I have to make sure that he is available for these type of sessions, that he gets to his appointments, because he will get off on a tangent and loses complete focus of what anyone else's schedule or timetable is, and he doesn't care. And it's not like he's trying to be rude or insensitive. He just doesn't focus.
He's just onto something else, and he forgets what was
exactly.
what was in the past.
And I, on the other hand, because of the nature of the career I've had, I typically have 6 or 7 things going on at the same time and have to remember the details of all of them, or things go real bad. So this is what I'm good at. He's good at what he's good at, and it kind of complements each other to some degree. That I know sometimes I aggravate him when I tell him let's go. I stop talking and move, but it's for his own benefit that he gets to where he needs to be when he needs to be there.
So he really, part of Terry is that you have to learn how to handle him.
Yeah, and there are not many people with enough gumption to take that on.
Well, I think he intimidates. The problem in the chiropractic community, he's the guy.
Well,
everybody's
he is
intimidated, but he needs people like you, people like me, who are not in that arena.
Right. Well, and I have
like
he and I have had that discussion.
Yeah.
I have told him to his face many times, you are a very big fish, maybe the biggest, in a very small pond. But when you get outside of that pond in the big ocean, you are unnoticeable. People don't care that you're Dr. Yochum. They just hear some windbag blowing his own horn, and they don't give a damn about that. I, on the other hand, would like to be your friend, and I care about you, and I'm not afraid to tell you when you're off base. I'm not afraid to disagree with you. If you ask for my opinion, be prepared to get it, because you're going to, whether you like it or not.
But you go back a long way with Terry. This isn't something that
and well, yes,
new. You probably did this as a kid. How old were you when you and Terry first got together?
14.
And what was it like back then?
Oh gosh, to a lesser degree, very similar. One of the things that stands out in my memory, perhaps more than any, even more than any of the sporting activities, Terry had a great passion for cars, and he didn't have one. His father had a couple, but Terry only got to use them on certain occasions, and they were not cool cars. Some of us guys had our own cars. I, for example, had a 55 Chevrolet Bel Air. There's a model right here behind me that's been on camera already. Mm-hmm. And a few of the other guys had cars. Well, Terry liked to be seen in these cool cars, so every Saturday he would organize a car wash in front of his house. So there would be anywhere from 3 to 5 to 7 cars lined up in front of Terry's house on the street, and Terry would be orchestrating who would do the tires, who would do the wax job, who would vacuum the interiors, who would clean the trunk. And if you paid attention, frequently you would find that there'd be one less guy working than there was cars, because Terry would be sitting on the front steps or disappeared into the house. leaving the rest of us to not only do our cars, but his father's. Well, some of us finally got wise to that and basically, hey, fat ass, get out here and do your part, you know. But even back then, he was, before this task was done, he was planning the next episode or two to, you know, what are we going to do tonight? What are we going to do tomorrow? What are we going to do next week? And we're not even done with what we're doing right now.
So he was a good social director.
Yeah, but he wasn't very good at the details of how to make the ideas come to fruition.
Yeah.
He was, even then, he was the big picture guy, but he couldn't make 5 minutes worth of detail happen right now. He needed people like me and people like John White and a couple of others who were a little more grounded to make the plan happen.
What did you guys do? I mean,
oh my gosh. Well, there was, of course, baseball. I played ball at Cleveland High School with Terry. I was not as gifted an athlete as Terry. I was pretty good, and I could hold my own, but I didn't have the size. I didn't have the arm strength. Terry tried to convince me that I was a pitcher, and I promptly blew out my arm. And so I was more of a peripheral player, but I enjoyed it.
Was he as good as he says he is? I was going to ask Whitey for a scouting report on Terry, but I think I'd rather ask you for a scouting report. You knew him as a...
I would say Terry was probably easily in the top 10% of high school pitchers in the St. Louis area at that time, and that was a lot of high schools. But being in the top 10% of all those players really isn't the elite status to get you into the major leagues, which is where Terry wanted to be. You might have had to be in the top 1% of the top 1%, and Terry wasn't that good. His fastball was average, mid to upper 80s. I'm not sure if he ever threw 90. He might have. But it didn't have a great sinking movement. He had an average slider that most of the time was flat. Had minimal downward break. And he could get probably, out of every 100 hitters he faced, he could get 90 of them out with no problem. But every now and then he would face an elite hitter who murdered him. The farthest ball I have ever seen hit in my life, I saw hit off of Terry Yochum at Crondelet Park at the Lower Diamond. In right field, there is a series of light standards. There was a guy, and for the life of me, I don't remember his name right now, but I guarantee you if you ask Terry who hit the longest ball off of him, he'll know. This guy hit a ball off Terry down into right center. It was a left-handed batter. Pulled it into right center. This light standard is approximately 75 feet tall. Hit it over the light standard, across a set of railroad tracks, and the ball came down in a landfill area across the railroad tracks, went over a train that was passing by at the time. I've never seen anybody hit a ball like that. I mean, it would have went out of any major league ballpark in the country. But this guy was one of the best high school and amateur players in St. Louis. So, you know, Terry could get those guys out some of the time, but frequently they got him.
What did he have that was outstanding? He was average fastball, average this, average that. What did he have that the other guys didn't have that might have set him apart a little bit?
Fanatical desire. If you got a hit off of him, he just was so berserk to get you out the next time. Not that he would retaliate and hit you. He didn't walk many people. He had pretty good control. But he just went nuts. You beat him. You got him. He's got to beat you. And I think that's what set him apart from me. In many ways, is I played for fun. He played because he had to. He was driven. I enjoyed it. I mean, I played a lot of ball. I played hurt a lot. I played on teams where I worked. Many years I played. But not at that level. And not anywhere near that drive. And the people that we played with, very few of them had that drive. And that's what set him apart. I mean, many of us could step on a field with Terry, and he was better than most, not as good as some. But clearly he was the most focused, maniacal player out there. No one could stay with him as far as being driven to excel.
What kind of effect did this have on the rest of the team? You know, they say the superstar makes everybody better. I mean, it seems to me that if somebody that was driven like that, again, there's that, you either love him or you hate him.
Well, most of the people at that time, on the few teams that I played with Terry, were glad when it was his turn to pitch, but they were also intimidated because if they knew if they did something wrong, he'd be all over them about the mistake they made. And I don't know that he even realized he was doing it. It's just that he expected them to be as dedicated and fanatical as he was, and not everybody was. And sometimes, although they were glad to see him pitch, because everyone knew that if Terry was pitching, we had a pretty good chance to win. Sometimes, if we lost, they ran for cover because they didn't want to hear it. So,
it's like having another coach out there.
Well, yeah, or even worse, because this is one of your peers just blasting you because you did something that cost Terry Yochum a game. Not that they did it on purpose, but, geez, lighten up a little bit. And he didn't.
But put the glove on the other hand. Did the players ever get on him if he messed up?
Merciless.
So he gave as well as he got.
Yeah. I mean, if he ever did mess up, I mean, we weren't shy about letting him know. But he really didn't mess up that much. He went on to play on far, far better teams than I did because I had other things on my mind. He had baseball, and I did other stuff. He played on a team called Flexolite. I didn't know much about that team. I knew a few of the players, but I think that was Terry's first exposure to really good teams and what playing on a really good team could be like. And I went to watch a couple of the games, but I didn't play on it. And then he moved on to better teams. I got drafted by the Army, so I lost contact. By the time I got back, he was gone to school. So my observations of his baseball career kind of ceased at that point. I knew he was very interested in it and kept active in it, but I didn't get to observe much of it anymore.
Now you talk about all he had was baseball. You know, he's more into baseball than education, but there's a big side of him that he's like a music guy. And a dance guy.
Well, that was our other big high school activity. There were a number of things in the St. Louis area at that time called teen towns. A number of the Catholic parishes and a number of the privately owned dance halls, virtually every night of the week, if you wanted to find one, would have a dance. They weren't real big on disc jockeys back then, but they would have these little live local bands that most of them were decent. Some were very good. All of them were okay. But we would make the rounds to a number of these teen towns. And most of the guys at that time didn't have a clue how to dance. And that was when swing dancing and what people in St. Louis call imperial dancing. And I guess imperial dancing was named after a particular venue that we went to called the Club Imperial. They had acts there. That's where we kind of got introduced to Ike and Tina Turner, and Terry fell in love with Tina Turner and that brand of music. But this was where the swing dance and imperial dance started in St. Louis. Well, Terry fancies himself the dancer, but Terry's sister is the dancer. She picked it up very well. She is very light, very small, very graceful. Terry always was a rather bubble butt. But his sister taught him the proper steps, and he went through them, and I learned some of them. But we'd go to these teen towns, and nobody knew how to dance but just a few of us. So, of course, we enjoyed it more than they did because we could participate. And everybody would stand there and look at us, and, of course, I didn't care that anybody looked at me, but Terry thoroughly enjoyed being the center of attention, as always. And, you know, most people would think it's a little weird to dance with your sister instead of a date. But Terry at that point wasn't interested in the dating aspect. He wanted to be the superior dancer. And as long as he was dancing with his sister, he clearly was the superior dancer because she was.
Carried him.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Now, he may disagree with that, but there are too many of us that share this opinion. And, you know, Terry was pretty good, but Kay was very good. And that's where the music started and the dancing, and that's still alive today. Through his sister and his sister's children and his children, he's pursued his interest in music and dance, and they got involved with swing dance clubs in Denver and in St. Louis, and nurtured the kids through instructions and national competitions, which they actually won. I mean, they've got trophies and ribbons and banners, and they were not slouches. They excelled. And of course, Terry's quite proud of that. And anytime they would exhibit any interest other than that, Terry would not necessarily so gently nudge them back on the right path so that they would fulfill his goal, his plan for them. Exactly.
It's just like Dad all over again.
Yeah,
Kenneth
yeah.
Yochum,
They are frighteningly similar in approaches in that regard. But getting back to a point you started before, his father was such a towering influence in Terry's life, and remains so to this day. When Terry speaks about his father, he still speaks with such reverence, such awe, that I believe that is one of the, if not the, driving force behind Terry. He still, to this day, is trying to live up to what he thinks his father would want him to do, and the image that his father would want him to project. And I think Terry has driven himself to the point, I don't think he will ever be satisfied with himself. I think Terry has, and I don't say this to be critical of Terry, I mean, I'm genuinely concerned. Terry has driven himself to the point that he is, it's almost like he feels inferior in some way, that he can never live up to this image, he can never live up to the fulfillment that he should, even though he has far surpassed his father in terms of professional stature, education, standing, he can't convince himself of how
Yeah.
good he has become in his field.
And the drive will never end.
No.
That's
So that's, and I've tried to convince him of that. I don't think he is satisfied or convinced of his own success in life. He's got success issues. In when we change tapes here, I want to tell you a story about something Terry said when you weren't here yet.
Okay. Let's stop right here. Sure. Change it. I think somehow, while he's up on that mound, nobody can get him.
That's right. He's in a different. Well,
Yeah.
there are two. While we're on that subject, nobody can get him. Yesterday, we had a teacher here, Mrs. Loretta Booth, and I spoke to her on camera, and Terry was present. While we were discussing our relationship at school with Mrs. Booth and some of Terry's escapades with her as his teacher, we got off on baseball. And Terry was explaining to Mrs. Booth, one, that in baseball, more than any other sport, it is a level field except for the pitcher's mound. The pitcher's mound is the highest point. When the pitcher steps up on the mound with the ball, all eyes are on him. Nothing happens until he decides that he's going to throw the ball. Everybody has to stand there and wait until he throws the ball. And he relishes that limelight. He admitted that he seeks that limelight. He wants to be that guy, head and shoulders above everybody else, that everybody is looking at and looking to make things happen. I think that's a very telling statement. The other thing he said, which I think is a huge key, in the course of our conversation with Mrs. Booth, he made the statement, particularly concerning baseball, but I'm not so sure that he wasn't speaking more of things in general. He made the statement that he regarded himself as a failure. And that's the word he used, failure. Well, I immediately went back to that point and I said, Terry, how do you regard yourself as a failure? Explain that. And he started telling me, well, I played the ball and I did this and I did that, but I just never was quite good enough. Even though I wanted to be, I was never good enough to make it to the major leagues. And I said, Terry, it is a terrible thing that you define your life and regard yourself as a failure because you did not make it to the major leagues. I said, when did you start playing ball? He said, I guess about 10. And I said, how old are you? He said, 60. And I said, are you still playing ball? Well, yes, I am. I said, so how long has your career been? He said, well, I guess it's been 50 years, maybe more. And I said, what's that thing on your finger? He said, well, that's my Senior World Series championship ring. And I said, well, Terry, how many major league pitchers have a 50-year career and never win a championship? Don't have anything to show for it other than a broken down arm. How can you sit there and even think that your career and that you are a failure. And I think that is a terrible self-thought.
Yeah, I think that's where he gets his drive. You know,
Yeah, but
basic insecurity.
he is insecure.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think he's a happy person. I think he's had some things happen in his life that he has not been able to control, and he is a control freak. He couldn't control how good he was as a baseball player. He was what he was.
Yeah.
He could push as hard as he could push, but he couldn't control getting over the top.
Yeah.
He's got family issues, which, you know, he has a daughter with an illness that he can't control, and that eats at him. I know that he loves his son very much, but he's very concerned because he's chosen a rather risky career path.
Yeah, he went to Belmont College in Nashville.
And I've heard Phil play the
drummer.
drums, and he is very good.
Yes, he is.
Very good. But it's a tough industry to crack.
Yeah.
And Terry's worried about that, and he can't control it. He has no influence in the music industry. So he's worried about that. He couldn't do anything to solve his father's illness and death. Couldn't do anything to solve his mother's illness and death. And I'm convinced to this day that he still is bothered by that. And he dwells on these things, and it keeps him so driven and so focused to control what he can rather than accept what he can't. He's not good at accepting the things he can't control.
And you know, all great people who have done things that are great, and Terry's certainly one of them in his line of work.
Mm-hmm.
They all have that tragic flaw.
Yes.
And of course, we all have a tragic flaw because none of us is perfect.
Exactly.
That's to remind us all that we're mortal.
Mm-hmm.
But that I agree that's his one flaw, is that he is so driven.
Yeah.
And he needs a challenge. He constantly needs a challenge.
Well, he has sat in my house on several occasions now talking about his career and his future. And with the death of his brother-in-law, he ran smack dab into mortality at his age.
Mm-hmm.
It's one thing when your parents die, but they're 20, 30, 35 years older than you are. But when your family at your age starts to die, and you are looking at that right in the eye, and it might be you, he's begun to dwell on that. And he has sought my counsel, and I'm sure others, probably yours, about how to start backing down. He's not going to be good at that.
Well, he wants to sell his practice.
Yeah, but he doesn't want to sell his practice.
True.
He wants to sell his practice.
But on his terms.
But, well, and I keep trying to get him to understand the goal. If the goal is to get top dollar for this practice, and perhaps its true value, well, then you're liable to be eating this practice for a long time.
Yeah.
But if the goal is to cut back and relax a little bit and focus on the things that give him enjoyment, and he says he prefers the teaching, the lecturing, the helping student aspect more than being cooped up in a little room reading films.
Yeah.
And I said, well, then you've answered your own question. I'm not advocating that you give your practice away, but if you take less than top dollar to achieve your goal, then achieve the goal and seek the happiness. Forget the money, you don't need it.
No, he doesn't. He's got a lot of other things in the works that
Yeah, I mean, if
he's never going to retire, that's for sure.
no, but and I did not counsel him to do that. I said, but focus on those things that you enjoy, that give you pleasure, that make you happy. Focus on your family. Focus on your wife.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Stop dealing with the issues that aggravate you.
Well, you know, I'm hoping that just this week, I'm here till Thursday. And we talked about all the things we want to do. He wants to go dancing again. He wants to go do the music. He wants to just get that cell phone
But
and turn that off.
But here again, he is telling you all the things that have to happen. You have to go to Ted Drew's.
Well, he wants to show these things to me because he's told me so much about him.
Okay, but
Yeah.
look at the context. It's like everything has to be scripted. Nothing extemporaneous.
Oh, yeah.
Nothing just, hey, what are we going to do today? Let's go take off and see what happens. No. It has to be scripted.
Yeah.
But he tries to put so much into the script that you shortchange most of it.
And then it's a failure.
And then it's a
That
failure.
built-in failure.
And then he builds himself
Yeah.
up to fail.
Yeah.
And we're back to me being the social secretary.
Yeah.
You know, I try to keep him on track, and you can't do everything at once. And I'm sure when he's not in St. Louis, he's doing the same thing to other people. I'm not so stupid. I think I'm the only one that he does this to.
Yeah.
So
It's kind of a bad pattern that he gets into. But you know, this is in life, and I've told him this, that everything that he's achieved, everything that he enjoys, it is not without its drawbacks.
everything
It's not without
has
the
a price.
It's exacted from him.
Yeah.
He's
and,
paid for everything he's gotten in another way.
Well, and not only has he paid for it, my wife's got a sign up in the backyard hanging by some rose bushes. Says, stop and smell the roses. He plants a lot of roses. He hasn't gone back to smell any of them.
He plants them for other people.
Yeah. He plant your rose
Hmm.
and let you smell it.
Yeah.
He won't go back and smell his own roses.
Yeah.
He's too busy planting the next guy's rose.
Agreed.
And, you know, I'm genuinely concerned about that. I mean, he's wired too tight.
It's almost like you need to do an intervention with him. Sit him down with all his friends and say, Terry, this is for your own good.
Yeah,
That
now,
you've done everything that you can possibly do. Now, let's, buy a boat and go sailing or something. Find something else that you want to do. I'm trying to get him to take up golf.
well, you and John White and me and a number of people.
And you know how hard that is? Because he's out there, I don't know how to golf.
Well, let me tell you a true story. Before his sister's husband got ill, early last summer, I guess, summer of '06, Terry was in town. We took him to a driving range. Now here's a guy never hit a ball in his life, never hit a golf ball. And we said, Terry, you can hit a baseball, you can hit a golf ball.
Yeah.
The difference is this golf ball isn't even moving, it's just sitting there. Put your eye on the ball, swing the club, if necessary, swing it just like a baseball bat, like you're hitting one off the dirt. Well, he was a little awkward at first, but after a few swings, he was actually doing rather well. Now, he would have to learn the subtleties of long game, short game, chip shot, pitch shot, and that sort of thing, but it's not that he can't do it. He doesn't want to take the time to do it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure if he did take up golf, it would not be a relaxing hobby like it might be for you or for me. He would have to be on the pro level.
Yeah, you want to keep score.
Yeah.
Keep score, I want to win.
Yeah. Who won? Who cares who won? Did you have a good time?
Yeah. See, that's why I couldn't believe the fact that he wanted to be like I put in the preface. This is the part that I cut out, that he wanted to learn how to be an umpire. Totally something that, he's totally alien. He doesn't know what he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's been, I think that part, it's taken him
Yeah.
into a different, because there is no competition with umpires. We don't keep score. We just try to,
No.
and I think that's been a little healthy for him. But, to switch gears a little bit. Now, you guys, Terry talks about how you and he put on this dance.
Yes.
Now, again,
Yes.
if you're gonna keep score, you had 900 people at the dance?
Yeah.
Talk about how that all came about.
Oh my gosh, let's see. Somewhere around 1991, 2. I got a call from Terry's sister, I think. I don't think Terry called me. I got a call from Terry's sister. Terry has an idea. My first thought was, oh no, not again. Because when Terry has an idea, as I told you about car washing, Terry has an idea for us to do the work. And this pretty well worked out that way. Because if you're going to put on a dance in St. Louis, there's not a whole hell of a lot of work you can do in Denver, other than pick up the phone and say, here's what I'd like you to do. Well, he got his mother and his mother's friend and his sister and a few other of our classmates to start researching all of the classes of the 60s. The graduating class of 1960 through 1969. 10 years worth of classes. Fortunately, Cleveland High School has a teacher who is a historian type figure and had the names and addresses of probably 90% of those people. Well, there were mass mailings, invitations, notices, send in your money, keep track of who paid, set up a caterer, set up the bar at the Casa Loma Ballroom here in St. Louis, very historic dance hall. It's been around since, I believe, the 20s. I got 10 years worth of yearbooks from this historian teacher. I and my secretary at work copied all of the pages of the senior classes. I copied all of the pages of pictures of the sports teams, football, baseball, basketball, hockey, or not hockey, soccer, swimming, track, pages of the proms, the snowball dances. There was, hundreds of copies. And then, of course, Terry's sister and I and a couple other people went to the Casa Loma and taped these pictures up to the walls, and where each class had their own area where they could go look for their pictures. And we had, about 900 people show up at this first sock hop. And it was a heck of a lot of work. And Terry's contribution was the concept and more ideas of things to do, of which he did very little himself.
This sounds like Tom Sawyer, doesn't it? All of a sudden, I think it's...
Terry is the closest thing to Tom Sawyer I've ever seen. Come paint my fence for me. Yeah. So we had this thing, and it was a huge success beyond anybody's wildest dreams. Terry would blow into town and review where we stood and issue more orders, and then go back to Denver or wherever he went on his next trip. And his sister and I did, and his mother did the bulk of the work. I mean, we there for a while. It was every day. But it was fun. And it really turned out that night was a huge, huge success. And it was fun. Well, of course, if the first apple tastes good, let's have a second apple. A couple of years later, Terry gets the idea. Let's have Sock Hop 2. We go through the same thing. Well, fortunately, we had kept all the information about the addresses and all that, so it made it a little easier to do. And I told Terry, I said, I'm not making all those copies again. I don't care what you say, I'm not doing it. So it was more of a traditional dance and less of a reunion type thing, because a lot of the people that came to the first one came from out of town and couldn't come back or wouldn't come back for the second one. But some of the ones who missed the first one and had heard about it did come to the second one. So we had well over 750 people at the second one. These are a couple of the largest reunions or gatherings of Cleveland alumni ever. There's only been one other one that was more people. Not only that, it was at one point it was the largest gathering ever in the Casa Loma ballroom. I mean, we were about 150 over their fire code limit, and we just kept packing them in anyway. And it was huge.
Another competition.
Yeah.
Another competition won.
And to this day, if you talk to Terry about the Sock Hop, the first thing out of his mouth, well, we had the largest gathering of Cleveland people ever put together in the highest crowd ever in the Casa Loma. It's not that, hey, I saw people I hadn't seen in years and I had a hell of a good time and we had a ball. It's the statistics of how well we did.
Yeah.
Wrong approach as far as I'm concerned,
Yeah.
but that's him.
Yeah,
That's Terry.
Spend so much time planning something like that when it finally happens, you can't enjoy it.
Yeah. Can't stop and smell your own roses.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Always wanting something that you're never going to have.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I wish I was left-handed.
Yeah. Enjoy what you have. Be happy for what you've got. Don't
No.
wish for something you can't have.
And that's not Terry.
And that's not Terry.
Yeah.
And I have had so many of those conversations, but they've been one-on-one. He'll sit in my house, and we will sit up 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning in these deep philosophical conversations, and he says he understands and he knows what he needs to do, and he's going to do this and he's going to do that, but I don't see the evidence of it.
He can't do it.
No, he can't pull the trigger and slow down.
Yeah, unfortunately. Now, what was he like in high school? Was he one of the, I mean, he wasn't really good academically, so he could have been a lot better than he was. We agree to that. He'll say the same thing. But
Well, certainly,
the rest of
and
the
he
kids-
proved that when he went to National and
Yeah.
was forced to buckle down. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
he today still talks about the fact that his first report card at National he thought was a mistake because it had 4 A's and a B, and he had
Yeah.
never gotten 4 A's in 4 years in high school.
But in high school, you had a really large class. You had like 600 to graduate.
Our graduating class was 552, I believe, or something like that. And it was a pretty well-rounded group of kids. There were some very good students. There were some really poor students. And there were some guys like Terry who could have but didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a perpetual prankster. I mean, he had stuff going on that we did things to teachers that we probably should have gotten put in jail for, or at least thrown out of school. One particular teacher, nice guy, but had no business being a teacher. Poor man's name was Randall Gover. Turned out, in addition to being the teacher, he was the B-team baseball coach. Never met a guy that probably knew less about baseball in my life. Had no business being a coach, but very ineffectual teacher. Couldn't control the classroom. Very nervous sort. And he would try to maintain discipline by giving you the look. That didn't work because nobody cared about the look. We would do things like when he would turn around to write something on the blackboard, people would take a handful of pennies, fire it at the blackboard, and they'd be hitting all around him. And he'd turn around and everybody'd be sitting there. He knew who did it, but he couldn't prove it. There were 3 lunch periods at Cleveland High School at that time because there were so many kids. And as it turned out, there was this gang of about 8 or 10 of us. Terry was in it, I was in it, John White was in it, several other people that Terry probably has mentioned to you, Bill Rusin, Alan Doughty, Paul Clay, Paul Shuden, Keith Carpenter. It always turned out that during the lunch period, 1 or 2 of us had Mr. Gover, and 1 or 2 of us had lunch period all the time. So some of the gang of thieves would be in the room, and the rest of us would be roaming the halls because it was our lunch period. We would catch Mr. Gover away from the door. So you'd open the door, fire in some pennies. And he'd come running up to the door, and somebody'd be outside in the summer when the windows were open, they'd fire in some pennies. He knew who we were, but he couldn't catch us. And we drove the poor man crazy. Just drove the poor man nuts. And Terry was always in the middle of things like that. If he would have put as much effort into academics as he did into screwing around, and certainly as much as he did into baseball, he probably would have graduated with a 4.0 grade point average,
Yeah.
but he didn't. I think he regarded school at that time as a means to get to play baseball. That was it. He had to put up with school so he could get on the baseball field in the spring. That's about the only reason.
Yeah.
And the fact that if he didn't go to school, his father'd kick his butt.
His mom and dad.
Yeah.
How'd the other kids in the school respond to him? Did he have a lot of friends?
You know, no. There were kids in that school who was everybody's friend. You know, everybody. But our particular group, and Terry, we had a lot of acquaintances. We knew lots of people. But our circle of friends was this little constant contingent that I don't think we had that many good friends. It was just this little group of guys and some of the gals that, you know, we dated or bummed around with. But no, I wouldn't say there were a lot of friends. Not Terry knew a lot of guys on the sports teams. He was in the Letterman's Club and knew guys from other sports, but not friends to the level of being friends. Not like this little group that we were. I mean, we basically did everything together.
Mm-hmm.
And there were other groups like that. It's not that we were peculiar. Were other people friendly? Sure. I mean, we were friendly with almost everybody.
But he wasn't like your prom king, and he wasn't
No,
like,
no.
none of that stuff.
No,
He
no,
wasn't
not at
like-
all.
He wasn't like the big guy.
No, and there were some like that.
Yeah.
That you know they were in the school play and they were the prom king and the prom queen and oh no, none of that.
So he was just a pitcher who was there to wait for spring.
Pretty much, yeah, I think so.
Yeah, well, not a lot has changed there.
No.
So-
If you have to say anything about Terry, he is, if nothing else, consistent. He is the same Terry today that he was 50 years ago, 40 years ago. 30 years ago. His education level may have changed. His economic situation may have changed. His family situation may have changed. He hasn't changed a bit. He's still the same wired up, over-focused, driven maniac that he ever was. And, you know, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but that's Terry.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, I think we could stop with that.
works for me.
That's a good place to stop.